I don't want to give the conventional speech. Allow me to make a presentation on what I think are our thoughts. When I received this invitation, I had so many thoughts. I first prepared a presentation on why government is right on what we are doing. Then along the way I said, are we right? So this morning I came with two. When I went around these discussions that you had yesterday, I said, I think the best is not to say that government is right on everything. So I chose the Garanga effect. You remember the Garanga effect? Garanga was an army commander in Sudan and was told to go and manage South Sudan because they were becoming stubborn. So when he got there, he remembered he was in Uganda like other South Sudanese. So he turned against the North, and that's how the revolution came to South Sudan. My colleagues from finance, I'm not saying I'm going to abandon government, but I wanted to listen to these, my stakeholders. These are our customers. And if they don't do our work, we don't do anything. So I wanted us to have a balanced conversation. So my presentation is based on what we can do together, rather than saying the government is doing this, you're doing that. So I thought I should have some slides, and later I don't speak as fast as I used to do. I'll try to run through these few slides, but the whole intention is to provide a conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, the objective of this conference is done, or this dialogue is done. Because we had a conversation yesterday, you discussed, agreed on the action points, and said we go forward. And the output that I came this morning instructing my officers to do is already done. So we can get our transport refund and go. Because honestly, it is done. So what are we here? Please go to the next slide. In my presentation, I want to spend time discussing some of these, since you've covered the whole agenda. I will talk about the market as it is today, particularly addressing how the clean cooking market is shaping. I will also present some business cases that we will, and Ruth made a very good presentation on what we need to do. So these things that I'm saying, she said them, I'm only saying them differently. She talked about health, environmental, and economic benefits of the policy reform, which I will also emphasize just to show you that we are together in this. I will mention a few fiscal incentives that we have and the strategy that we can have to enhance that. I will also mention countries that have picked lessons and what they picked from that. And then I will specifically spend most of my time in this presentation on what we need to do. You know, it's one thing to say remove tax. He comes from finance. In every meeting he attends, the ones making iron bars say, you see, when you don't remove tax on iron bars, people don't build. You see, building is very important. According to MEMD, buildings are very important. Then the next day goes to another team. They say, for us dealing in petroleum products, you know, we transport you. Who didn't drive here? All of you drove here. Transport is very important. Remove tax. It's very important. So I would want us to structure our advocacy in a way that meets the benefits that we want. And part of my action plan presentation, you've already done. I've seen the outputs, and that's why I said, apart from our transport refund, there's not much business today. Okay? So let's go to the next slide. And she said these things, I want to emphasize it. She told us that there is a crisis in cooking. That most of our people are cooking with traditional biomass. The maintenance is very high. And we are dying on charcoal and firewood. These are not my words, they were Ruth's words that we discussed yesterday. And that the prices of this charcoal are going up. Most people may not afford this going forward. Up to about 15,000, between 15,000 and 25 weekly expenditure on charcoal. So this is not sustainable. This is a crisis. But we must also remember, and this is the thing we forget every time we come for these conversations, that Charcoal is a business also. It's a very lucrative business, and I was reading two documents. One was developed by FAO, and I'm glad that they are here. There is a Charcoal document they developed a few years ago that estimated that this business is about 1.3. That time it was 1.2, so I added because it has grown about 1.3 now trillions. There is also another document by the World Bank that even makes it worse. For them, they say the business is worth 3 trillions. If you read about World Bank web study around Charcoal. So we want to move from a business that is a business for people to a better business because of its effect. So every time we have this conversation on clean cooking, it's very important that we put that into context. So that put into context, and I will show more figures to that. Our urban poor households income is spent about 15%. Is spent on how they cook. But I think let me go to the context of the figures. I think that will sound better. Please go to the next. There are businesses in this country, and probably the most lucrative business is Charcoal. And I've given statistics of the biggest businesses in a year. This is their annual turnover. If I use the World Bank figures, I go away from FAO, Charcoal could be the biggest business in this country. And I've given examples, MTN, that would not meet what Charcoal gives. And it's one of the big ones. Stanbic Bank, and I'm a bank of Stanbic Bank. Their annual turnover or their annual business would not meet Charcoal. And I'm not here to make a case for Charcoal, but I want us to understand the context of the business that we are talking about, because we want tax reforms. You can go on. Even cement, which is a big one, does not even come to half of this business. So while we are transitioning, and I support us to transition to better business, we must also appreciate where we are coming from. And that's why I thought that in this conversation, even when we write our paper, it must also realize some of these issues. When you're talking about employment, for example, as your justification for this paper, which is very good, and I like the way you presented it, you must also appreciate that all of you combined are not employing more people than Charcoal. So we need to structure our message very well, and that's the essence of my presentation today. That we must be very, very, and she said we need evidence. So we must create a good evidence paper that will address this. So those are figures. Let's go to the hidden costs. Next. However, even with the benefits that I have mentioned on cooking, we must appreciate that there are a number of hidden costs beyond even the household expenses that I have mentioned. And she mentioned them in the paper. I liked the way you laid it out. You said people are dying. I have quoted a conservative figure of 13,000. But the World Bank estimates even go as high as 23,000 per year. That is a figure. I don't know the price of life. Because then if I knew the price of life, I would actually put it there and say if we continue cooking the way we are cooking, this is the price of life. But I just put what savings would come if we did not have diseases that are due to the way we cook. So about 26 million potential savings with only 20% of biomass reduction. So if we only manage to put in place, and this message is for our colleagues from finance and the other institutions, that if we only moved the needle by 20%, that's 26 million millions that would be saving. It's a big saving. And that's what our colleagues here are saying, that the savings are there. In terms of deforestation, you know we are losing forests. And as a country, we've come up with NDCs. We actually the other day revised our NDC to 24.7%. That ambitious, and forest cover is one of the biggest ecosystem contributors. There is even money if we saved these forests by moving cooking to better forms. We could be earning 15 millions in carbon finance just by moving what we are doing. And I don't know how much money we get in these VATs for these companies. So if we put together all the VAT we are paying, I doubt it is 15 million. Is it? So again, coming to the paper, and I'm glad I presented the paper first. There must be evidence in the figures. People in finance don't understand the words you've written. They think you see life becomes good. For them, they want numbers. If you have no numbers, you have no paper. You must tell them that if I move the cooking, I am removing this tax. You don't pay a lot of money by now. You are paying very small money. So by removing that money from you, the country has an opportunity of earning that much. So that's what we want. But there's also a gender component, and it did come out very well in the paper again. I mentioned that we spend up to 4 hours, and this is mostly by the girl child. So about 730 million hours would be saved if we gave people better forms of cooking. This is the evidence that we want. So one can now turn around and say, what is 730 million hours to a Ugandan? Of course, most of it we spend it on TikTok, so we can offset some for TikTok and leave a few productive hours. How much money is that? How about the spillover effects of saving the girl child, having to look for firewood, the rape and the other things? Those things must go into money if you're going to finance. Don't go there with the word. They think of, cooking good is good. Doesn't work in Ministry of Finance. They want figures. Next slide, please. And I had here, and you see I have put in red allegedly, meaning I'm not also so sure, because I don't want to look like I'm saying things that are against government. I said we are told, and she mentioned it here, that the biggest hindrance is tax. The biggest hindrance is tax. That's what you say. I could have my own thoughts away from that, but I also believe that tax is a big burden. That's why I said I wasn't very sure, but allegedly you say that tax is a big one. So the objective of this meeting, colleagues, particularly from the other MDAs, is to address tax barrier. And we are thinking that there is a tax problem, and that's why we are convened here for 2 days. And I've given an example of how we should write our things. We cannot just say, see, when you have tax, you see when it's not a burden until it is terminated. And I've given an example here. I have broken down using the best equipment that we have. VAT, import duties, and all the others. You have different figures. And I showed you that if we only moved some of these taxes, then we would be able to sell an equipment that would have been 120 at only 85,000 shillings. That in itself represents affordability. But it's not enough. Let me even add at this point. In your paper, you must have things like these, not just words. Those words, we can get them. But tax people understand this. But there's something missing. Who could guess what is missing here? Is willingness to pay or affordability. You must show that we estimated, and you know that the majority of the consumers are able to pay a maximum of 90,000. So by removing tax, this is the proportion that I will be able to move into the affordability bracket. That is very important. With figures, you must say, if I move like this, have we done willingness to pay? We've not done that. So I've just given an example here, again, in line with the paper that we have. So our people, we've done studies. We have a World Bank study on clean cooking before we started the scale up. And we have done willingness to pay in that paper. And we think if we only moved one thing, we'll be able to increase the affordability, because government doesn't have all the money. For example, we have an LPG project. I think every time we choose to cut money, we cut from that project. So instead of burdening our pockets as government, let's remove some of these things so that private capital can bring in money and have our targets. And this is just an example. I could have gone on with EPC and the others, but I thought this was important. Next slide, please. So I saw this coming out very well in the paper, but I just want to highlight that the paper started very well and our conversations have started very well. But for emphasis for our colleagues from the other MDAs is that this paper and our argument is aligned with our vision 2040. We want to move from being peasants to a modern society. And part of that, peasants cook with traditional biomass, by the way. So we are not going to go to 2040. We are not going to protect any gains that we've not gained in cooking. So that's the first one. This paper is aligned, but we're also emphasizing that as us, our revised policy of 2023 again speaks about universal access and of course sustainability of energy transition. So we came up as a country with an energy transition plan, which was the basis of the policy or the reverse, and now the basis of NDP4. Again, that is very critical. We developed NDP4 strategy now, and I'm glad that I was very active in that. But in it there, we're very emphatic on the role of cooking. And for colleagues who are coming from elsewhere, cooking serves two purposes. Allow me to mention those two purposes here. They could be three, but for the purpose of this meeting, let me mention. Apart from the other benefits of cooking, cooking also provides us a distributed anchor for our electricity sector. If people moved to cooking, for example, with electricity, it means that our daily energy bills would disappear or go down. And that's why we think promoting e-cooking or incentivizing e-cooking or green forms of cooking is a double benefit. If we were in a bigger meeting on renewables, I would have even mentioned that it helps us in mobility, in developing the decentralized options like many grids, making them a business case that matters. But we are not alone here, we are part of the globe. So I want the paper to go beyond just the national aspirations. Talk about the SDGs. The SDG 7 specifically is also key. So framing our argument here around those, and I just mentioned before, you could increase that list on the gender, on energy transition plan and the others, makes this sensible. Next slide, please. As we frame this paper, or as we frame our argument and advocacy, we must also put the investment multiplier effects. That when we get these tax incentives, I didn't see this coming out very well. We are not just creating losses to government. Because for us in government, we see you telling us to lose. Our objective is to expand the tax base, right? Now when you're coming to us say reduce the tax base. And sometimes I also get worried. After you come for tax, the next day you're going to come for subsidies. So you're telling us to reduce tax, then tomorrow you say government should give us subsidies. Our RBF has dried out. So the same tax base you've reduced, you want to go back for subsidy. But in a more practical way, we are not proposing that we are losing. There are better ways to earn more money from this team than taxing them on the things that we are doing. So what these guys are asking for is a tax relief, just like other incentives have stimulated growth elsewhere. That tax relief, it should be, we can time it and scale it, but the intention is to stimulate market growth. Our market is not growing as fast. So we can increase the market by increasing affordability, because when the consumption or the consumer side is responsive, it means the market will grow, and then that will lead to multiple returns, such as the health savings that I talked about, the carbon finance, and the jobs. And we'll be able to calculate the employment that can come from a mature, clean cooking market. This is very important for us to integrate in the paper. Next slide, please. And we have to get benchmarks. You see the challenge, and I like the example, Ruth, that you provided when you say on ethanol there is this, and there is none on this one. But we need to go for global benchmarks. And that's why people laugh at us, Director, you're here. Every time we tell private sector we want to go for benchmark, they think we just want to sit on blame. We want to make evidence-based policy decisions. So even our paper, even if you're not taking us to places, make sure they are global examples. And I provided some here from India, from Kenya, and from Rwanda. When Kenya tried to put an incentive for LPG, there was growth. When they removed it, they started going down. And my colleague has told me about what is happening to their solar industry. They are going to do the same thing. When you provide incentives, it grows. You remove incentives, it comes down. You could have other stories elsewhere. So we want to see real evidence that the things you're talking about work and they've worked. So that if we must ask our peers in those countries that are in tax, they can agree with us. So that is a missing component within the paper. And I'll give you an example. Justin will speak after me because she has more details. But I'll give you an example. And I gave it to my colleague. In the past, tax exemption, the zero rating for ethanol, the natured ethanol, was only for cassava, right, Okona? But we did the benchmark and we structured the paper. Justin will speak about that in details. And we're able to zero rate almost from all commodities, right? So it tells you that our policy framers also don't want to work in isolation. They want to see that what you're saying works. And I've had conversations with Sarah here, that sometimes these people want tax exemption to increase their profit margin. And at some stage we shall have a conversation to agree that if an EPC costs 300 today, if we take off 40%, it cannot go beyond this price. That conversation must be had in this group, amongst this group. Because we will take off tax and the consumers may not feel the tax exemption. So that is examples. Next slide, please. So I'm taking long, but you see nowadays I slowed down a bit, so please bear with me. We want to have tax requests that are very specific. As government, we want to present clear, actionable policy recommendations that we can implement immediately, don't just remove. And I forgot to mention, when you say 10 years, also justify, it's not like every technology needs 10 years. I think that's a point that will come back. But you see, I phrase these like things that we can do today. They are time bound, you know, and you're specific on what you want to be done. For example, and these tax people will explain, they don't explain very well. When corporate tax deductions are allowed for 150%, there is a meaning, and the tax people will explain that allow us to go to 150. Don't just say move everything. So let's make sure that we have specific ones and we give them time. We say for 3, for parents give us 7, because we think that's what it takes to grow the market. But for LPG, give it 1 year. It is a mature technology. So there must be specific such that we say, okay, pretty clear. But if you just say remove, such that the market grows, we will not remove anything. They must be specific and doable. And they must be based on the analysis that you did. For this one, do this. For that one, do that. For this one, reduce. And I know that when you benchmark in other countries, they've done that. So you can be able to structure your requests. Be specific as you create this paper on what you exactly want. Can we go to the next slide, please? I'm taking a lot of time, but I'm an old man, so bear with me. Even as you write this paper, and I didn't see this coming out, build on what is existing. You know, government is like a parent. You know, when you give a kid pocket money and they just go shouting, that was sent, just say that you gave me 10,000, but I need 15. So I didn't see you mentioning what is existing. For our foreign friends who are here, they will think this government is the worst. Because you don't acknowledge any existing, and Justin is going to list about 10 or 15 in her presentation after me. So we must list the existing frameworks. This government is a government of the people. It listens. And I see some of you disagreeing with me. So there are certain things are not disagree with government. It's very dangerous. There are some existing incentives that are already in place. Say we have this, but we want you to move the needle a bit to this. With this that you gave us, we're able to move to this level, but we can move to that level. And I mentioned some here, Justin has a better presentation. LPG, ethanol for cooking, those, but I think you mentioned part of it, you mentioned something on ethanol, but you just mentioned it in comparison. So let's put, and you can see how it is up to 30th June 2028. Government doesn't want blanket exemptions forever. So you must provide evidence that why we should either go to 2028 and not 2027. There are things at the regional level, for example. But we also are doing some support on starter kit distribution, particularly around LPG. And I saw in the corner there, you acknowledge that. Let that come out clearly in the paper or in our advocacy. That's important. But most important, the government is supporting on RBFs. Some of you used to be very small. Now you're very fat because of these UNACC RBFs. I have seen people here who are struggling to enter that door. Yes, because RBFs are there. These are things that we're working on. JZ has been all over this place, giving you all kinds of incentives. Make sure they come out very clear. And if there are issues to them, and Sarah has been saying, you see there are a few people, we need to give, we can't give them to everyone, including those who don't have governance and who are not aligned. So make sure that this comes out, it's not mine, it's Madina's fault, it's not mine. So, next slide please. But also begin to mention the non-fiscal incentives that are already in place. Because that is very important. Government does not just give you the fiscal, but there are also non-fiscal incentives. We have standards in place, and I saw those in your recommendations. The aspects around procurement, but I know that government, through our partners, is investing in market activation. There is a lot of consumer awareness. And in another meeting, I told the director that for me, that is where money should go. Today I will not say it because he will not be happy with me, but he knows that if we only raise the awareness, we will not even need tax exemptions. I can repeat it for purposes of those who were not there. There were no tax exemptions on phones, but all of you have two. All of you have two. I've never sat in a meeting or with finance saying, please reduce tax, we need subsidy, we need RBF. All they did was raise awareness. And that's why we said we should get a neutral player, and that's why is raising awareness of cooking along with her partners like UNACC and the rest. The issue is when you raise awareness, these things are not expensive. You're talking about things of 300,000, 100,000. Some of you are carrying iPhones of 7 million and you want an RFA. You're here. So you're talking to finance, reduce tax before we can afford. Why don't you tell them to reduce tax on iPhones also? But you appreciate that iPhone is classic. That is why you are buying it at a price of a lot or America. So there are financing lines that UNACC has even put in place. Both UNACC, but also other players. You could go to these banks they have, and I'm sure there are some here. I've not seen Madame Semakula, but she will be here telling you about financing lines. These are things that help you to manage. So beyond the tax, while I appreciate tax is a big hindrance, there are many other things that we have. For me to tell people to buy an EPC, I've never seen anyone that has understood how an EPC works, saying but the price. Apart from those small ones though, that don't even have electricity in their houses. But people who are sensible, we presented on e-cooking in Entebbe, sorry, in Ibali with Justin. And every stakeholder said to us, what people want in this country is awareness. That's why people carry iPhones and I don't carry one. Maybe because I can't afford. So I like the approach that you have indicated, and I like what the paper says, that don't come to us individually. Set up a coalition. coalitions work. You don't have to riot through streets with placards, reduce taxes, but you are already structured well under UNACC. That you have all of us here, but there are also other platforms I knew that would be represented here. So I didn't want to look like I'm promoting UNACC alone. They are all the others. Let us join efforts and work on this paper and push. So building our future together, protecting our gains together in this industry is very important. So, you say it's the wrong group formula. Yes, we should protect them. So you can bring these clean cooking manufacturers. And I heard the chairman talking about manufacturing in this country. Some of your requests are against manufacturing in the country. I will not mention them, but we are contradicting ourselves in our requests. One side, you want us to lower import and remove import tax. Then you're saying we should emphasize local manufacturing. So what should the minister do? You are in a way unlocking the market for Chinese and the British and the rest. And then you're saying we remove tax and then promote manufacturing. How shall we send younger people abroad to learn manufacturing when you've taken away all the money? So let us be careful on how we structure our requests. I don't think removing import tax promotes local manufacturing. But they also equipment distributors, financial institutions that I saw Annette here, and the others. We have development partners, but all of you here who are Alliance members, you should have a unified message. It should not be for our parents to be at least a rest and nobody will. There must be a unified message that speaks to the same. And make sure that we appreciate as government that this is not just a subsidy, but a way of kick-starting investment that will spur many jobs, many health benefits, and many other spread opportunities, including carbon. Next. I'm running slow, but it's a conversation. After all, the agenda is done, right? So allow me to have a conversation with you. You are the ones who presented the paper, now you want me to finish. You said we should go for evidence, and I'm providing approaches of that evidence. This evidence of Tulibubi doesn't work with us in government. It has to be structured in a way that makes us listen. And I've given examples here. Story plus number approach is critical. If we do this, we shall save so many people or save so much in cooking. That should be the structuring of our message. Story from numbers, especially when you're going to our own of the budget. Tell them, if we do this, 1,000 daily, then support with that. Say, if we save this, we move to this. That's how we should structure. No one is so insane to say, if you gave us this tax exemption, so many voters will not die. Because we are in the period of voters, right? So talk about voters, don't call them human beings. People will understand. Then this trade-off framing is very important for us in government. Revenue foregone from VAT, how do we gain it? Because PSST, where he sits, he has given us a revenue projection for many years. Now you're telling him to lose 50 to 80 billions per year. And you're just saying, when you remove people don't die. That's not his immediate preoccupation. He also has targets. He's measured on how much he has been able to expand the tax base. So please, when you go there, tell him that if you move from here, if you start these guys to grow their businesses, there will be benefits. And you can quantify them in health, forests, and carbon. You can say if we move to 50% by only removing this thing, it means that we can sell our carbon credits. And this is the one hosting the carbon finance unit. Is this thing still working? I feel like I'm just shouting now. Oh, it is working. Yeah? Give me the one that has light. I see it better. I need shouting. So you're seeing how we phrase it. You can tell him that whatever we shall sell, we shall structure it like this. In the revenue sharing, if we get 500 billions through carbon credits, 300 billions will go to government, or 200 will go to government. And we commit you that by this uptake, it will work. And give him evidence. He's saying in Nepal, when they did this, they were able to earn so much money. That works. Then you can come up with pilot commitments. You say, if you give us this, I remember, and just to share with you details of Cocoa Networks. They were able to give us these figures. They said, if you do this, we are able to deploy so many. So even you come up with commitments. You said, if you give us this tax waiver, we are able to deploy so many, which will lead to these so many benefits. So I want that paper to move in that direction. Next slide, please. Make sure that you know who you're talking to. Sometimes the chairman confessed here that they went straight to ERA. ERA is a regulator. They are not even supposed to engage with you. They only engage with you out of naivety. They are supposed to be on the other side. Some of these are policy issues. We should engage with either their players, their regulators, they set this, but identify your key players. Amongst the things that you need to do in the paper, map out who can make decisions at every level. And in this case, we have identified finance, and I'm glad they are here. But finance will also listen to us, because we are the custodians of policy for energy. So you must move with us, and I'm glad we are here. That's why I had to make sure that I was here today. Because I want to move with you, I want us to move together and say, indeed what you say is correct, we can change something. And I've given an example, we've done that before. These parliamentary committees are very critical. I don't know whether we have any parliamentarians here. Because sometimes policies come from that high level. And I will show you how to time this. You know? So there are parliamentary committees like those on finance, those of natural resource. And for them, they don't read a lot. The paper that you presented is very good for us who are in the business of reading. Parliamentarians don't want to overread. Summarize these things, make them sharp in policy briefs level. You will have your big document, but make it precise. This is the issue. These are the barriers. If we remove them, this is what we will get, but these are the benefits. So do that. Uganda Revenue Authority was supposed to be here, but even if they were not here, they are here already. Please stand and we clap for you. Where is you already? You lied to me that they are here. Now you're all looking behind. You're all saying they are behind me. So, but at least their bosses are here. So, that is very important. And there is a code, HS codes. You know those HS codes? They must be understood on these commodities. And I see people saying, you say I wrote my thing, it was misinterpreted. We need to work with them, let them understand when there is something that has come, whether it's East African Act or stuff like that, let them understand. And I'm glad that you have development partners who can provide donor leverage and co-finance result-based frameworks. And Annette is here, JZ is here, FAO is here, and all the others are here. You could go beyond this and have others as well. And I'm glad that Beyond the Grid Fund is also here. These are our partners. And here I provide a pitch of what we want to do. I'll not read it by one by one, but these are kinds of statements that you want to put in policy briefs. What works? If I do this, it will do this. If we remove this tax, it will help us to move this needle, which will move that, and it will lead to the multiple benefits going forward. This is very important. And I've given a statement. You don't have to copy it verbatim. You don't say as per this one. Me, I'm just telling you that. You must have statements like those. This will lead to this, this will lead to that. Next slide, please. Media and public opinion strategy is also key. And yesterday, I want to recognize good achievement that you started. UNACC did something very good. I was on Twitter, and I'm always there. Of course, I don't have followers, but I'm always there. But I saw you people calling the public for this tax dialogue. Because beyond you, the businesses, they are consumers. You might even be telling us your own things. Consumers don't even know. They don't even understand how this tax affects their affordability. But it would be your business deals you are calling us. But I liked it that you sent out an invitation to the public to attend here. So it's very important. So you should have press campaigns to show how tax cuts would lower these bills, so that people understand. So when you're going there, don't just say, and Sarah keeps telling me, you see our members want to make sales. So when you're going to these butcheries, you should not just be there, you see, we want to make sales, that market doesn't sell. And that's the sometimes things I don't want to hear. Even when you're in those markets, use those opportunities to talk about why taxes are making those things expensive, such that you get support from those faculties as well. Radios, but of course the digital engagements are also critical. So make sure that you're using all forms of media. When we have our paper here, which you're going to improve, you say this is draft 0. There is going to be an opportunity for you to pick key pitch messages. You can say this week we are pitching this message, and tag those that are supposed to hear what you're saying. Someone from NEMA may pick up your information and say, so you're saying if we move VAT on EPCs, my forests will stay here. So make sure that you break down the message into key messages. I don't know how you call them, director, you used to have very good words, but those small messages that you said this whole week, we are tweeting that. And don't just say it's a UNACC tweet. Some of you have your tweet pages and you're tweeting nothing. The last time you tweeted your, is it called tweeted? You know it. The last time you did a tweet is 10 years ago, you were here with one tax exemption. You may not get the president into this room to hear about your tax. But if you structure your message very well, and one day we shall talk about branding as an opportunity. My colleague there, she's an expert in branding. You do these talks that she does very good. How do you call those talks? Podcast. Those podcasts. After this meeting, do them. Then send them out. Let all of you pick it and you raise, awareness about the need to do these things. Then things will happen. But you will come with your document. You know how many documents are PSST stable. So maybe you'll get him on Twitter, and that's the only place you get him. Most those other things when you tweet. Next. And I'm taking too long, but I say the business is done. Only transport refund. So addressing government concerns. We are concerned, and I've mentioned them severally. And allow me to repeat them. Revenue loss concerns. Structure your responses, because these are key asked questions. We call them FHUs. You should know what to be asked. The number one question you will get in MOFPE is, as you're going up the steps, we are losing revenue. You can't go there just maringaling around, it saves lives, it does this. Go there with that answer immediately. Because for us, we are concerned, we are supposed to increase revenue. So make sure that you've answered our concerns on loss and show us how we shall recover this in other ways. Or when your industry grows, how shall we even be able to get this? I've been worried, and indeed government is worried about market distortions. These non-timed incentives, be it fiscal or non-fiscal, have a problem. And I'm not going to spend time here discussing some of them. The last time I discussed them, I was warned by one of you. Stop talking about RBF, stop talking about these things, they are bad. And I said, okay, I will not die if I don't talk about that, I will get myself. But I have my problems with you saying, all you need, we just need to have these things in place. So show them that these are temporary incentives to kickstart a market, and make sure that you structure them per technology if you must, or per fuel if you must. And say for ethanol, for it is moving like this. If you added us 1 year. For this one, if we move it like this, it would work. And you show within the period what will be lost, and within the period what will be gained. That's very critical. Implementation complexity. So I talked about the HS code. show us how we shall be able to enforce these. I see people coming to me, you see, they've interpreted my battery is inside the appliance and they are saying I'm only exempted for part. You should explain and say, when you give us this tax, this is how we shall implement. Because sometimes government wants to give you incentives. But we are even worried on how we shall implement that incentive. So, demonstrate how you will be able to enforce and be part of it. And now we shall monitor. You can talk about, and I mentioned UNACC doesn't mean there are no other frameworks for reporting. How do we report on the performance? For example, who is reporting on the performance of RBFs today as a form of incentive? The last time when we called people to talk, my engineer friend, one of the engineer friends came and said, "You see where you're going, you'll die for nothing. Don't talk about this RBF." I said, I will not talk about it until the next meeting. So there must be a mechanism that you should provide to PSS and say, we shall be able to report like this, and we tell you how the market is shifting with these incentives. Next slide, please. Timing of your advocacy. And I'm glad that this dialogue is happening at the right time for one of the reasons. Budget preparation. The budget called circular is out, right? From finance. We have started planning for the other financial year, right? So this is a good time to get your issues to us, because then we think about that. That's very critical. But there's also parliamentary sessions. It may not be a good time to present your paper now to Parliament, because 60% of them will not come back. They will just eat your transport fare. But time when we are able to start legislation, put up this paper. So you can engage with us, but at Parliament, maybe it's not a good time. But we've had issues when we are doing our policy review. Some of you participated. Why were we not putting these things in the policy? Because then we would be telling government, you see, we committed that in the energy policy revised, we would take off these taxes, or we revise them. I think we have a part of that. So if it's even there, you can quote it and say, they could be there, but in the vein, reduce taxes. So that's very important. And of course, international events. There are many events that we come to. And I told you, stop using these events to sell EPCs. You know? You say we are just going to REC. When we go to REC, we don't sell. You see, we want a place where we sell with CPG and all these things. It's important, but are you leveraging these events to talk about issues that matter? And I'll give you a strategy. Sometimes there are 10 breakout rooms, and UNACC is a massive facility. You would tactically go and put 2 people per room. So when a minister talks, when you put up a set tax. In the other room, when a PS is speaking, you set tax. You know, these are stories. Don't just be on your midlands, it's you know, for us, REC is very far, we don't save. You know, these are things that are transformative, okay? So let's leverage these opportunities, not just saying I've made no sense. And I hear these conversations among these people. So there are these rates, there is COP. I've not seen a UNACC member at COP, for example. Maybe some members have gone there. There should, are you moving so fast next? So there should also be ways of measuring success in this message. So in the paper there must be a section, define clear metrics to track the effectiveness of what we shall have done. Define it in the paper. We say after every quarter or after this period, we shall have adoption move to this level. And you've mentioned it here in the paper, but how do we track that? We have a reference on what? Price reduction. And for me, this is my concern. Business people are business people. You remove a tax, they increase their profit base. So in finance, they will ask you this. Should we come in a liberalized market and set a cap? Do we agree, for example, to set a cap on EPCs? Do we say that the current average price of an EPC is 300,000? Can we take off 35% and say no EPC sold in this country? What will be 35% of 300,000? about 100, right? Can we set a cap on EPCs? Because PSS would want to know that these tax incentives I'm providing are leading to real lowering of the prices. So do you agree that as we structure our paper, we make it very clear that we shall put a cap that you can play within that price but not higher? Madam, now you've created another presentation. Okay, this is the problem. So, and this is a very important point, and I'm sure my colleagues from finance will repeat it. How much market growth are you going to lead with this? These are questions that you will not survive as long as you are in the finance house. But I've warned you about this grammaring for tax exemptions. We'll ask, for example, I ask you a question. What is the average price of an EPC? Getting it here before tax. What is the average price?